Good afternoon. My name is MattWaters, and today I'm talking about the importance of cross-cutting concepts. I'll begin by talking a little bit about myself. This is my 18th year in education. I graduated from the University of Georgia in 2007 with a degree in agricultural education. I taught agriculture and served as an FFA advisor for 10 years, and then I started teaching 7th grade life science, and I've done that for the past 7 years with the Gordon County school system. This is my capstone presentation for the Masters of Science of Education program at the University of Georgia. During my presentation, I will be discussing the importance of utilizing cross-cutting concepts when teaching science as outlined by the next generation science standards. In this presentation, I will explain what next generation science standards are. I will describe the framework for K through 12 science education, and I will present the 7 cross-cutting concepts while providing a lesson that demonstrates the use of one of those cross-cutting concepts. So we will begin with the question, what is NGSS? The Next Generation Science Standards are the result of a 3-year culmination that was authored by 26 different states, and it was jointly created by the National Research Council, the National Science Teachers Association, and the American Association for the Advancement of Science. These standards and framework were created as an effort to provide a basis for enhancing the way science is delivered and taught in our American science education classrooms. NGSS formulations appear to focus on the same scientific habits of mind as those previously thought to be important by the authors of the benchmark for science literacy, which was edited and updated by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. These formulations are still essential today and are referenced by our current Georgia Standards of Excellence, GSE. While digging further into the NGSS and how they compare to the GSE standards, I found that Georgia did not fully adopt the NGSS standards, but did adopt standards that are 3-dimensional and integrate content with science. In an article posted by the National Science Teaching Association, in the past 10 years since the NGSS was released, 44 states have implemented the standards. According to the Georgia Standards of Excellence website, members of the Georgia Department of Education adapted the NGSS standards to be implemented through a PLC, or Professional Learning Community approach. The PLC approach includes 10 guided discussions that can be used throughout the year to learn more about the structure, background, and intended outcomes of the GSE. Teachers are encouraged to work in a PLC with department or content grade level groups to learn about different aspects of the standards. Even though Georgia did not fully adopt the NGSS standards, they still incorporate the most valuable aspects of it, which set it apart from the old GSE standards. These aspects include 3 dimensions of learning, which are spread across all science standards. The 3 distinct components are equally important and include disciplinary core ideas, cross-cutting concepts, and science and engineering practices. This new way of teaching science comes in the wake of a dire need to educate and prepare our students for today's demanding STEM-related careers. In an article by Jim Short entitled, "The Need to Align Teaching with Next Generation Science Standards," he states, better science and instructional materials and curriculum based on professional learning programs are needed in our country to have large-scale change for an ever-changing and developing world. According to Campbell and Lee, 2021, the challenge with implementing the NGSS nationwide involves what a vision of science education could look like. The science of education community has been working diligently for decades to develop high-quality instructional materials, while NGSS designed instructional materials only recently emerged. The authors go on to state, because the vision of science education articulated in the framework and in the NGSS is rigorous and informed by a wide range of stakeholders such as scientists, science educators, and policymakers. The science education community needs to examine how research-based instructional materials can be enacted in the classroom and how the teacher professional learning can be promoted so that all students benefit from the classroom instruction. I find this to be true for myself as well in Gordon County School District. Since I began teaching life science, it has been encouraged by my science coaches and by my administrators to model our lessons from the next generation science standards. Through my coursework over the past year, I have gained an in-depth knowledge and a better understanding of the NGSS framework that I have already been utilizing in my classroom. The next generation science standards are different in that they are based on a K-12 science education framework that reflects the interconnected nature of science as it is practiced in real-world applications. This framework encourages students to be engaged in three core dimensions: science and engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, and disciplinary core ideas of science. Today, I will be focusing on the importance of the cross-cutting concepts based on the NGSS and the K-12 framework. According to the National Research Council 2012, cross-cutting concepts have value because they provide students with connections and intellectual tools that are related across the differing areas of disciplinary content and can enrich their application of practices and their understanding of core ideas. I am automatically drawn to believe in the purpose of three-dimensional teaching. As I am what is considered to be a veteran teacher, it is part of my personal philosophy that subjects should not be taught in isolation, but rather intermingled between each other to give students a better understanding of the content. As Fick states in her article, a review of literature that uses the lens of the next generation science cross-cutting concepts. What is different about the approach to understanding systems as described in the NGSS is that the aspects of systems are more general and transferable across disciplinary core ideas. It is essential for students to build a seamless understanding of science across their educational journey. Utilizing the cross-cutting concepts provides this guideline. According to Fick, the goal of the cross-cutting concept framework is to independently deepen students' own understanding of the content. It is no longer acceptable that students try to memorize terms and basic scientific facts, but rather genuinely absorb the material and build off prior knowledge in order to learn more. The cross-cutting concept framework offers clarity to confusion and apply the same clarity across science topics. Now, we must consider that we are teaching children, and developmentally, children learn best when building off the prior knowledge they already understand. According to Fick, the cross-cutting concept is utilized as a tool for the design for the frame of the lesson. It is not meant to be a curriculum, but rather a guideline for teaching the disciplinary core idea. From a middle school standpoint, and what I always tell my students, these cross-cutting concepts use common terminology that can transition with them through their educational career while helping them connect science vocabulary and processes across all areas of science. Essentially, these concepts help students better understand that all sciences are connected. And this is actually a picture of a poster that I keep in my classroom. And you can even see the sticky notes that I have on here. When I teach about ecology, I connect that with energy and matter. When I teach about food chains and energy pyramids, I connect that with stability and change. And I think it's very useful to students to make that connection when we consider energy. As a sixth grader, they're looking at it as energy, maybe in the atmosphere, because it's earth science. When they come to my class, we're still talking about the same energy, but it's cellular energy within living creatures. And I always point out that when they go to 8th grade, still looking at the same energy, but it's in the concepts of physical energy for physical science. The science has not changed. The curriculum in which we teach as science teachers is not different. But the way in which we present to students and the way in which we ask students to approach science learning is different because of the three components of NGSS. I always begin teaching a science lesson to my students by presenting a phenomenon-based topic. Fostering curiosity is important because it captures the student's attention and encourages them to ask more questions, and ultimately it leads them to the inquiry-based learning style that is most effective. By utilizing cross-cutting concepts, we demand that students make the connection between all subjects, all dimensions, and grade levels of science. The cross-cutting concepts make science learning valuable to my students because of the need to scaffold and build upon each scientific topic presented to them, and it also helps the student make the connections to their own lives. When comparing cross-cutting concepts to the benchmarks for science literacy, I found that cross-cutting concepts have been around for about 2 decades, but were formerly referred to as themes or unifying principles. I personally feel as though the mandates that come from the state standardized tests require teachers to pull away from an inquiry-based way of thinking because it is viewed most important to simply prepare our students to be able to pass the state test. Although cross-cutting concepts have been around for a while, even though they are called something else, the NGSS framework noted that students have been expected to build science knowledge without explicit instructional support. Therefore, the role of the cross-cutting concepts are elevated and interwoven with the standards, curriculum, instruction, and assessments. Additionally, in understanding the cross-cutting concepts are taught and explained within differing depths of complexity at different grade levels to enhance students' learning, I feel that it is very important that teachers use common terminology when teaching these cross-cutting concepts. Each lesson that I teach can be connected and delivered by utilizing one of the 7 cross-cutting concepts. The cross-cutting concepts are as follows. Number 1, patterns, which is described as observed patterns of forms and events, guide organization and classification, and they prompt questions about relationships and the factors that influence them. Number 2, cause and effect, mechanism, and explanation. Events have causes, sometimes simple, sometimes multifaceted. A major activity of science is investigating and explaining causal relationships and the mechanisms by which they are mediated. Such mechanisms can then be tested across given contexts and used to predict and explain events in new contexts. Number 3 is scale, proportion, and quantity. In considering phenomena, it is critical to recognize what is relevant at different measures of size, time, and energy, and to recognize how changes in scale, proportion, or quantity affect a system's structure and performance. Number 4 is systems and system models, and it's explained by defining a system under study, specifying its boundaries, and making explicit a model of that system. Provides tools for understanding and testing ideas that are applicable throughout science and engineering. And this is actually the cross-cutting concept that I'll be talking about and connecting to my lesson example in a few minutes. So we'll be talking about that more. Number 5 is energy and matter, flows, cycles, and conservation, tracking fluxes of energy and matter into, out of, and within systems helps one understand the system's possibilities and its limitations. Number 6 is structure and function. The way in which an object or living thing is shaped and its substructure determine many of its properties and functions. And lastly, number 7 is stability and change. For natural and built systems alike, conditions of stability and determinants of rates of change or evolution of a system are critical elements of study. Now, my example today focuses mainly on the systems and system model cross-cutting concept while teaching about a lesson that involves the cardiovascular and the respiratory systems. However, it is important to note that more than one of these cross-cutting concepts could be applied to this lesson, depending on the goal of the lesson and the grade level we're teaching or the subject matter we're teaching. For example, we could consider the cross-cutting concept of scale, proportion, and quantity when having students understand that the physical traits of an organ affect the way the system performs. Energy and matter could also be applied when considering how ATP powers a cell for cardiac movement and pumping blood, for example. Additionally, these concepts can be applied to other science disciplines, such as physical science, if we were to be teaching the amount of electrical currents needed to cause a heart to beat and pump blood. I've taught this lesson many times, and for the purposes of my class, and the goal of this lesson is to understand how cells create tissues, how tissues create organs, how organs form organ systems, and how those organ systems create the total organism. This can be demonstrated by having students complete a graphic organizer similar to the one that I've created here. And it's something that I usually teach in the cells unit, so like the 9 weeks prior to us beginning the human body, students already have a basic understanding of where we're coming from cells building and creating upon that total organism. The lesson that I'm using today is an example of a phenomenon that incorporates the use of a cross-cutting concept that will provide students with the opportunity to observe how the cardiovascular and the respiratory systems must work together in order to help the body maintain homeostasis. The Georgia State standard for my lesson is S7L2, which states to obtain, evaluate, and communicate information to describe how cell structures, cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems interact to maintain the basic needs of organisms. I used element C, which says construct an argument that systems of the body interact with one another to carry out life processes. The NGSS alignment is MS-LS1-2, which states to develop and use a model to describe the function of a cell as a whole and ways the part of a cells contribute to form the function. Additionally, we can better teach this lesson by connecting it to the science and engineering practices, which state modeling in 6 through 8 builds on K through 5 experiences and progresses to developing, using, and revising models to describe, test, and predict more abstract phenomena and design systems. The lesson that I'm teaching includes the use of a pig heart and lungs that we obtained from a local butcher. This is some of my coworkers that I've worked with for some time now, and we kind of designed this lesson together. And the students really look forward to it, and it's a great way to culminate the two systems and show how they work together. The students are allowed to make observations of the lungs. We have a reverse vacuum cleaner that we attach to the lungs, and the students can actually watch those lungs expand and see how the two systems work together. Additionally, they get to make observations on a separate heart that's not attached, and we dissect that open so that they can see the 4 chambers of the heart. They can also note the blood flow throughout that heart as well. Additionally, a diagram and model has been created in which allows the students to label those parts of those hearts, and based on whether it's oxygenated or deoxygenated blood, they can follow that path through that heart. This is the model I created in Dr. Flanagan's class, And I think one of the benefits versus actually seeing the real thing, the students can take this handout after they complete it and hold it up to themselves. And it helps them understand the difference between the left and the right chambers, because that's one of the most challenging things, I think, for this unit. When they're looking at it, they want to confuse left and right. So that model is something that they can move and actually help themselves remember which side is the left side or the right side of the heart itself. So the model being used in my lesson is two-part. It has the actual pig models that are presented and demonstrated to the kids, and then this handout as well. In conclusion, when utilizing the next generation science standards and the K through 12 framework, cross-cutting concepts are a vital component of science education. They provide a firm foundation for understanding that all sciences are related, and they provide a common terminology for students to build upon their educational career. I also created this handout that's laminated, and each participant of this presentation can take this with them. It provides an explanation of NGSS, and it also has an explanation for the K through 12 science education framework. I listed the 7 cross-cutting concepts on here with their descriptions, and at the bottom there is a short description of the purpose of cross-cutting concepts and why they're beneficial. So I planned this as something that teachers can have readily available when they're making their science lessons, and use that to make the connections with the cross-cutting concepts. This completes my capstone presentation. I appreciate your time and consideration, and I hope that you all have a great day. Thank you so much.